The evening begins in a warm but suffocating silence inside the Cole family's suburban Atlanta home. The clinking of forks against plates is the only sound breaking the stillness. Ethan, a devoted husband and father, tries to smile at his wife Madison and their daughter Emma, but the smiles never reach his eyes. He senses something unspoken, a wall between them. Madison laughs at something trivial, but it feels forced, brittle. Her phone keeps buzzing beside her plate, screen flashing every few minutes. Each time she tilts it slightly away from Ethan's view, he notices. His gut tightens. Emma innocently chats about her day, unaware of the storm brewing between her parents. Ethan's fork hovers midair as another notification lights up Madison's phone. She quickly flips it face down. The silence grows heavier, louder than words. For Ethan, this dinner marks the beginning of the end. Later that night, while Madison washes the dishes, Ethan sits at the dining table, pretending to scroll through his phone. But his focus is locked on hers, resting on the counter and buzzing again. When the screen lights up, curiosity battles dread. Against his better judgment, he reaches for it, his hands trembling slightly. The message appears clearly, cruelly simple. "Can't wait to see you again tonight. R." Time seems to stop. The world narrows to that single glowing screen. His stomach drops, his heart races, and his throat burns as though he's swallowed fire. The letters blur as his eyes fill with tears he refuses to let fall. Ethan's mind races through memories. Madison's late nights, sudden coldness, forced affection. It all fits now too perfectly. He places the phone back exactly where it was, but something inside him has shattered beyond repair. Hours later, rain pounds against his windshield as Ethan's car crawls down the slick streets. Wipers slice through sheets of water, but his vision is clouded by heartbreak. He follows Madison's car from a distance, headlights dimmed. Every turn she takes feels like a knife twisting deeper. When she parks outside a hotel, he doesn't want to believe it. But the truth unfolds before his eyes as she meets Richard Hayes, her boss. They disappear inside together, laughing beneath the canopy of rain. Ethan grips the steering wheel until his knuckles whiten, tears blending with the raindrops on his cheeks. He lifts his phone and snaps a single, trembling photo, proof of betrayal. Hours later, he returns home drenched, hollow. Standing over Emma's peaceful face as she sleeps, he whispers through tears, "I'll protect you. No matter what." It's both a promise and the birth of something dark. Ethan Cole had built his life like one of his architectural masterpieces, carefully, symmetrically, with love in every detail. A self-made architect, he had risen from a modest background to owning a respected firm in Atlanta. Madison, his college sweetheart, had been there through every sleepless night and every small victory. Their love story once felt invincible. Flashbacks flicker through Ethan's mind. Their wedding under a golden sunset. The laughter when they bought their first home. The way Madison used to fall asleep on his shoulder as he sketched designs late into the night. To the outside world, the Coles were perfect, successful, happy, envied. But beneath the polished photos and polite smiles was a truth Ethan couldn't yet face. That illusion of a perfect family had become his last fragile shield. One he still clung to even as he stood surrounded by the quiet wreckage of betrayal. The distance between Ethan and Madison hadn't appeared overnight. It crept in slowly, disguised as exhaustion and busyness. At first she said work was overwhelming, that late meetings were temporary. Ethan believed her, wanted to believe her. But soon, small shifts became patterns. Her phone always face down, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne when she came home, her laugh turning into something hollow. He'd cook her favorite meals, plan family nights, even surprise her with weekend getaways. But her eyes never lit up the way they used to. Ethan poured himself into love that no longer had a place to go, and in return he received silence. Each attempt to connect was met with distance, each question deflected with irritation. Still, he stayed, for Emma, their daughter, whose innocent smile reminded him of the life he thought he was protecting. Yet deep down Ethan knew he was already losing everything. Marcus, Ethan's closest friend and business partner, noticed the change long before Ethan admitted it. Over coffee one morning, Marcus looked him squarely in the eye and said, "Don't destroy yourself trying to keep someone who's already gone." The words hit Ethan like a blow, but he couldn't respond. Letting go felt like failure, like watching his family's foundation crumble under his own design. Days later, a conversation with his lawyer added another layer of pain. If Ethan filed for divorce impulsively, Madison could claim half his company shares, half of everything he had built from scratch. The realization shifted something inside him. The heartbreak turned cold, strategic. He decided there would be no angry confrontations, no shouting matches. If Madison wanted to play betrayal with emotion, Ethan would counter with precision. From that moment, love gave way to calculation, and his quiet revenge began to take shape. The night was still when Ethan finally decided he couldn't live in uncertainty anymore. He sat alone in his dimly lit office, gathering fragments of truth, screenshots of texts, copies of hotel receipts, bank transfers that didn't make sense. Each file felt like a dagger to the chest, proof that the woman he loved had become a stranger. As he opened Madison's laptop to search for one last confirmation, her voice cut through the silence. "What the hell are you doing, Ethan?" She snapped, eyes blazing. He froze. She stormed forward, snatching the laptop from his hands. "You're insane. Controlling. Paranoid," she shouted, her voice shaking the walls. Ethan tried to speak, but she twisted the narrative effortlessly, turning her betrayal into his fault. Within minutes, she grabbed her keys and left, slamming the door behind her. Ethan collapsed onto the floor, realizing she wasn't defending herself. She was attacking him to hide her guilt. Morning light streamed into the kitchen as though the night before had never happened. Madison stood at the stove, humming softly, flipping pancakes while Emma chattered beside her. She greeted Ethan with a warm smile, cheerful and composed, as if the storm of accusations had been a bad dream. "Good morning, honey," she said sweetly, handing him coffee. Ethan watched her with quiet disbelief. Every move was calculated, her laughter too light, her eyes too calm. It wasn't remorse. It was performance. Madison had mastered the art of deception, switching personas as easily as changing outfits. To Emma, she was the perfect mother. To Ethan, she was the ghost of the woman he once knew. That morning, as his daughter laughed at her mother's jokes, Ethan realized the depth of Madison's duplicity. She wasn't just lying. She was rewriting the story of their lives, one false smile at a time. Later that week, while walking past the study, Ethan heard Madison's muffled voice behind the half-closed door. Her tone was low, intimate, different. He froze, listening. "I'll be free soon," she whispered. He's too soft to ever fight back. The words hit harder than any confession could. It wasn't just betrayal, it was humiliation. She saw his love as weakness, his kindness as a cage she was eager to escape. In that moment, Ethan's pain hardened into something colder, sharper. The tears that had once blurred his vision dried up completely. He stood silently by the door, staring into the dark hallway, his reflection faintly visible in the glass. Then, almost calmly, he whispered to himself, "You're right. I won't fight back, not the way you expect." That quiet vow marked a transformation. The man Madison thought she could break had disappeared. What remained was someone far more dangerous. In the days that followed, Ethan transformed his pain into discipline. On the surface, he was the same devoted husband, gentle, polite, attentive. He brought Madison her coffee in the morning, kissed her cheek before work, and laughed at her half-hearted jokes. But beneath the calm exterior, he was setting the stage for his quiet revenge. Every detail mattered now. He hired a discreet private investigator to track her movements, gather documents, and record her meetings with Richard. He contacted his lawyer, securing everything that mattered: his business, assets, and, most importantly, Emma's future. He opened a secret trust fund in his daughter's name, ensuring that no matter how ugly things became, she would never suffer. Ethan didn't want destruction. He wanted justice, control, precision. While Madison lived comfortably in her illusion, Ethan was rebuilding his power, brick by brick, behind a mask of loving patience she couldn't see through. Online, Madison's life looked flawless, filtered perfection. Smiling selfies, date night captions, and family portraits framed in golden hour light. Ethan stood beside her in every photo, expression calm, posture protective. Friends and colleagues commented with admiration. Perfect couple. Goals. Each compliment felt like a blade twisting deeper. He wasn't just living a lie. He was performing one. But the real pain came at night, when the world went quiet. Alone in his office, Ethan played old voicemails from when Madison loved him. Her laughter, her tender words, the sound of home. Each message cracked something inside him. He buried his face in his hands and wept silently, shoulders trembling. His tears weren't just for her. They were for the man he used to be. Yet even in heartbreak, his purpose hardened. He wasn't giving up. He was gathering strength in the darkness, where she couldn't see him coming. Ethan's quiet investigation soon uncovered more than infidelity. It exposed betrayal that ran through his very company. Madison had been funneling small amounts of money from his business accounts to Richard's firm, disguised as consulting payments. It was smart, deliberate, and cruel. Instead of confronting her, Ethan smiled through dinners, kissed her goodnight, and watched as she unknowingly built her own downfall. He meticulously reversed the transfers, rerouted the funds, and documented every digital trace of her deception. Every email, every receipt became part of a growing archive. The more she plotted, the more power he gained. He began to see her not as his wife, but as an adversary, one he would defeat with logic, not rage. His silence became his weapon, his composure her blind spot. By the time Madison realized Ethan wasn't breaking, it would be far too late, because the trap was already set. The Cole residence gleamed under golden lights as guests arrived in designer suits and glittering gowns. It was Madison's idea, a grand anniversary party to showcase her perfect marriage and her flawless life. The air was thick with laughter, champagne, and pretense. Madison floated from guest to guest, her hand draped elegantly around Ethan's arm, introducing him as my rock, her voice sugary sweet. Ethan played his role flawlessly, smiling, attentive, even delivering a heartfelt toast that drew admiring sighs from the crowd. "To love that endures," he said, eyes fixed on her. Only he knew the irony laced within his words. Madison beamed, believing she had regained control, unaware of the storm waiting behind the next slide. The music faded, lights dimmed, and the slideshow began. A montage of smiles, trips, laughter. Then suddenly the screen flickered. A single unfamiliar image appeared. The room fell silent. The illusion shattered. The photo on the screen was unmistakable. Security footage of Madison and Richard entering a hotel hand in hand. Gasps erupted. Some guests covered their mouths. Others exchanged horrified looks. Madison froze, her smile collapsing. "Ethan, what is this?" she stammered, voice trembling. Ethan didn't raise his voice or show anger. He simply looked at her, calm and resolute, and said, "Happy anniversary, Madison." Then he turned and walked out, leaving the crowd stunned and Madison standing in the ruins of her own performance. The next morning, her nightmare deepened. Lawyers arrived at her doorstep, delivering Ethan's divorce filing, complete with proof of her affair and her embezzlement. Every detail documented, every transaction traced. In a single decisive move, Ethan secured full custody of Emma, full ownership of his company, and legal vindication. Madison, stripped of everything she valued, finally realized the depth of Ethan's quiet, calculated justice. Days later, Madison sat in their now empty living room, the silence pressing against her like a punishment. When Ethan finally came to collect the last of his things, she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "Please, Ethan," she whispered. "I made a mistake. I'll do anything. Just don't take her from me." Her voice broke into sobs, raw and desperate. Ethan stood quietly, eyes full of sorrow, not hatred. When he finally spoke, his tone was soft but final. "You didn't just cheat on me," he said, his voice trembling with contained pain. "You cheated on the man who would have died for you." Madison's cries filled the room, echoing off the walls as he turned and walked away, his footsteps steady. For the first time, her manipulations, her lies, her masks, all of it meant nothing. Ethan didn't look back. His silence was the loudest goodbye she would ever hear. Months later, Ethan's life looked nothing like the one he'd once built, but for the first time in years it felt real. He and Emma had moved into a modest lakeside house, smaller, quieter, but filled with peace. The mornings were simple, breakfast by the window, laughter echoing as Emma chased their golden retriever through the yard. The heavy silence that once haunted their home was gone, replaced by warmth and calm. Ethan began therapy, learning to face the hurt rather than bury it beneath work or control. He reconnected with his parents, spent weekends visiting his sister, and rediscovered a version of himself that had long been lost. The man before the betrayal, before the walls. Every sunrise by the lake became a reminder that healing wasn't loud or sudden. It was slow, patient, and deeply human. For Ethan, rebuilding wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rediscovering peace. While Ethan and Emma found serenity, Madison's world unraveled. Her affair with Richard had ended brutally. He abandoned her when the scandal hit. Word of her embezzlement spread quickly through professional circles. Soon she was jobless, ostracized, and living in a small rented apartment far from the glamour she once flaunted. The mirror became her enemy, reflecting a woman she no longer recognized. One afternoon, while walking through a nearby park, she spotted Ethan and Emma laughing together under the sunlight. Ethan looked free, lighter, his smile genuine. Emma's giggles filled the air like music. Madison froze, tears welling in her eyes as she watched from a distance. It wasn't the wealth or status she missed. It was the simple, pure love she had destroyed. In that moment, the weight of her choices crushed her. She finally understood the true cost of betrayal, losing the family that once made her whole. Weeks later, Madison reached out, asking Ethan for a single meeting. He agreed, not out of affection, but out of the quiet strength that comes from closure. They met at a small cafe near the lake. Madison's eyes were swollen, her voice trembling as she apologized through tears. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. Ethan listened silently, compassion softening his gaze. When he finally spoke, his words were calm, deliberate. "I do forgive you," he said. Madison's eyes widened in disbelief, but before hope could form, he continued gently. "Forgiveness isn't letting you back in. It's letting myself move on." The silence that followed wasn't bitter, it was freeing. Ethan stood, nodded once, and walked out into the fading sunlight, leaving Madison behind. For the first time, the past no longer chained him. Forgiveness had become his final act of strength, and his first act of peace. Years passed, and the wounds that once defined Ethan's life became faint scars, reminders of survival, not pain. On a quiet evening, he sat at his desk overlooking the lake and began writing a letter to Emma. His handwriting was steady, each word carrying the wisdom born from heartbreak and healing. "When people hurt you," he wrote, "don't lose your kindness. Just learn who deserves it." He paused often, smiling softly as memories of her childhood flooded back. The bedtime stories, the laughter, the tears. He wanted her to know that strength wasn't in vengeance but in grace. That love, when protected with discernment, was still the greatest gift. Years later, Emma would find the letter tucked inside her graduation book. As she stood on stage in her cap and gown, her father in the crowd, she read his words and understood. Her father's strength had rebuilt both of their lives. The graduation hall echoed with applause as Emma crossed the stage, her diploma clutched tightly in her hands. In the sea of cheering families, Ethan stood tall, pride glowing in his eyes. He wasn't the broken man he once was. He was whole, steady, and deeply at peace. As Emma looked into the audience and saw him smiling, tears filled her eyes. The letter he'd written became more than advice. It was a legacy of resilience, proof that pain could be transformed into wisdom. After the ceremony, they hugged tightly, the kind of embrace that carries years of love, loss, and renewal. Ethan realized that his greatest revenge wasn't the public humiliation of Madison. It was this moment, watching his daughter grow into a kind, strong young woman, untouched by bitterness. What he had built through pain was now love reborn, pure, unbroken, and eternal. Later that evening, as twilight settled over the lake, Ethan walked along the same path where he once sat in the rain, heart shattered and soaked in sorrow. The water shimmered with gold reflections, calm and endless. He stopped at the familiar spot, hands in his pockets, the cool breeze brushing against his face. For the first time he smiled, not out of triumph but peace. The pain, the betrayal, the anger, they no longer held power over him. He had rebuilt his world, not out of revenge, but out of love and strength. As the screen fades to black, his voice echoes softly. Some revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about rebuilding yourself so beautifully that their betrayal can't touch you anymore. The camera lingers on the still water, a symbol of serenity and rebirth, before fading out completely, leaving the audience in quiet emotional awe.